My stepmother was standing in the hallway when I came down the stairs with my bag. My father had been gone for less than 4 hours. She looked at me the way someone looks at a problem they have been waiting to solve. And she said the words she had clearly been rehearsing since the hospital called. "This house belongs to me now. Collect your things and leave." I had a duffel bag, a laptop, and a key to a building she did not know existed. I zipped the bag. I walked past her. I said nothing. She had absolutely no idea what she had just walked away from. Welcome to her side of the story, for every woman who held it together, alone. If you are new here, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. You are going to want to follow this one all the way to the end. I promise you that. My name is Nadia, and this is my story. Before I tell you what happened at the will reading before, I tell you about the attorney in the folders, and the moment the entire room went silent, I need to take you back, way back, because nothing that happened at the end makes sense unless you understand where it all started. My mother passed away when I was 10 years old. Her name was Ruth. She had dark hair and a quiet laugh, and a very particular, unhurried way of folding laundry that made it look like her mind was somewhere else entirely. I still remember that. I remember the laundry more clearly than I remember the funeral, which tells you something about how grief decides what to hold on to. After she was gone, my father was lost. He was not a man built for conversations about feelings. He had grown up in a small town, spent his career in property assessments and spreadsheets, and carried a particular kind of quiet around with him everywhere, the kind that fills a room without ever saying a word. He did not know how to comfort a 10-year-old girl who cried in the bathtub every night, so he did the only thing he actually knew how to do. He taught me math. Every Saturday morning, he would load me into his old pickup truck, cloth seats that somehow smelled like leather, even though they were not leather, and we would drive around looking at houses. Not to buy them, just to look. He would slow down in front of a property with a sign in the yard and say, "What do you think that one is worth?" I would guess some number. He would correct me. Then he would explain why. Square footage, lot size, comparable sales, what direction the kitchen windows faced, and how that affected value in colder months. How to read a neighborhood's future from the storefronts on the main road. Why overpriced listings always used the same 3 words in the description. I did not understand half of it at first, but I understood that he was talking to me, and for a while that was enough. By the time I was 12, I could read a mortgage statement faster than most grown adults. I could estimate property tax from a listing photo. I could sense when something was overpriced before I had even finished reading the numbers. He said to me once, idling in front of a 2-story colonial with a cracked driveway, "Money does not fix everything, Nadia, but knowing how to count it means you will never be caught off guard." I carried that sentence with me for the rest of my life. That same year, my father married Sandra. She came into the house with a 2-year-old daughter named Becca, a warm smile that covered every room like a fresh coat of paint, and a pot roast she made every single Wednesday without fail. She rearranged the kitchen. She bought new curtains. She called my father sweetheart in a voice that sounded practiced. I wanted to like her. I genuinely tried. But within 6 months, my bedroom had been repainted and renamed Becca's playroom. I had been quietly moved into the smallest room in the house, the one beside the garage that smelled like motor oil and cold concrete. My father said, "Sandra went through a hard time before. Be patient with her." I was 12. I was patient. Sandra was not a villain in the way people are in movies. She did not scream or throw things. She was far more precise than that. She was thorough. Within 2 years, she had reorganized everything in that house to center around herself and Becca. The family photos on the mantel shifted gradually. First my mother's pictures moved to the hallway, then to the upstairs landing, then into a box in the attic labeled old frames. In their place went studio portraits of Sandra, my father, and Becca, all 3 of them in matching navy sweaters, taken at a department store photo booth. I was not in the photo. I had not been invited to the session. She also took control of the household finances, quietly, without drama, without confrontation. She started keeping a spreadsheet on the family computer. Every grocery run, every gas receipt, every subscription tracked and categorized. She called it the family budget review and presented it to my father on the first of every month. I was never invited to that meeting. When I asked my father about it, he explained that Sandra's first husband had left her with nothing. No savings, no car, no credit history. She lived in fear of that ever happening again, and he asked me to understand that. I did understand. I even felt sympathy for her, for a while. But sympathy has a shelf life when the person receiving it uses it to justify pushing you further and further from the center of your own home. By the time I was 14, my name was the one she forgot to put on the Christmas cards. Every December she sent them out, the Irving family on the front, a photograph of the three of them on the back. No Nadia. One year a neighbor named Mr. Calloway asked her directly why I was not in the picture. Sandra laughed and said, "Oh, Nadia is always so busy with school. She never has time for photos." I was standing 3 feet away. I had been home all afternoon. My father heard every word. He looked across the kitchen at me, and I could see something moving behind his eyes, something that looked almost like it wanted to be a sentence. Then he picked up his coffee mug and walked into the garage. That was the year I stopped expecting anyone to fix this for me. The summer I turned 16, my father drove me to his office on a Saturday morning. He closed the door behind us. He sat me down across from his desk and opened a manila folder with my name handwritten on the tab. "I started this for you 2 years ago," he said. $5,000 in an index fund. In your name only. I looked at the account statement. The balance had already grown to $6,200. I did not fully understand compound interest yet, not the mechanics of it. But I understood the weight of what he was placing on the desk in front of me. He was building something Sandra could not track, could not access, could not fold into her monthly spreadsheet. "Do not mention this to Sandra," he said. He held up one hand before I could speak. "Not because it is a secret, because she will worry about anything she cannot monitor directly. This belongs to you. Keep it that way." He showed me how to read the quarterly reports. He explained how to measure the fund's performance against the index. Then he handed me a pocket calculator, cheap plastic, cracked case, keys that stuck when you pressed them, and he said, "Keep this. Always do your own math." I kept it. I still have it today. Over the next 2 years, he added to the fund when he could. Small amounts, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. He also began talking to me about a commercial building he held a partial ownership stake in. 6 floors downtown, mostly office space. He had bought in years earlier when the neighborhood was rough and the price reflected that. "Someday this will be yours," he said, the way some fathers say that about a truck or a watch. I nodded. I had learned by then that when my father gave me something, the right response was to stay quiet and hold on to it tightly. 6 years later, I graduated summa laude in forensic accounting. The fund had grown from $5,000 to $62,000, and the commercial building downtown, the one he had said would someday be mine, was already in my name. He had transferred the first shares on my 18th birthday. Each year after that, more shares followed, more paperwork, more quiet, unhurried transfers that no one at the Wednesday dinner table ever knew were happening. There was nothing to announce. It was just math. I left for college at 18 and did not really come back. Not in the dramatic way, no slamming doors, no tearful speeches in the driveway. I loaded 2 suitcases into a used car my father had helped me buy and drove 4 hours east. Sandra waved from the kitchen window. Becca, who was 8 years old, did not look up from the television. I rented a studio apartment near campus, one window facing a parking lot. A radiator that clanged through the night. A $7 thrift store coffee maker that produced genuinely terrible coffee. I drank it every morning and felt, for the first time in 6 years, like I could breathe without asking anyone's permission. My father and I talked every Sunday. He called at 9 in the morning, before Sandra was awake, and we spent 20 minutes going over the fund, the building shares, market movements. He never asked about my classes. I never asked about Sandra. It was the language we shared, numbers instead of feelings, returns instead of apologies. It worked for us. Every time I drove back to visit, something in the house had changed. The first year back, My childhood bedroom had become a yoga studio. Mat rolled out on the floor, incense on the windowsill, an ocean sound speaker mounted on the wall. The second year, the garage had been converted into a craft room for Becca. By the third year, there was not a single photograph of me visible anywhere on the first floor of the house I had grown up in. Sandra never once asked what I did for a living. She never asked what I earned. She looked at my coat, my car, my shoes, and made her assessment. Getting by, nothing more. The idea that I might be doing well, that I might be doing extremely well, simply never occurred to her. Because in Sandra's understanding of the world, I had always been the one who did not matter. Meanwhile, my father kept transferring shares of that building into my name, quietly, methodically, one careful step at a time, the same way he did everything without fanfare, without announcement. By the time I turned 28, I owned the building completely, 100%. The neighborhood had transformed entirely. The tenants were on full market rate leases. The building my father had bought into when the block was still rough was now worth more than every house on our street combined. Sandra had converted my old bedroom into a yoga studio the same month I signed my first commercial lease. Neither of us ever mentioned it. My father was diagnosed with severe cardiomyopathy the spring I turned 32. The doctors said it was manageable. Medication, monitoring, rest. What they did not say was that visiting him would require Sandra's permission. The first time I called to arrange a trip, Sandra picked up and told me he was resting and the doctor had said no stress. The second time, she said he was not seeing visitors, and that she had everything under control. The third time, I drove to the house without calling ahead. Sandra met me at the door before I reached the steps. She said that arriving unannounced was itself a form of stress. Then she closed the door in my face. I stood on the porch for 2 minutes. Then I walked back to my car. That night I called my Aunt Vera, my father's younger sister. 70 years old, sharp as a tax audit, and the only person in our entire family who had never been charmed by Sandra's pot roast, or her carefully maintained smile. Vera had always seen through the performance. She simply hadn't said so out loud, because my father had never asked. Sandra has been telling everyone in the family that you are too busy with work to come around, Vera said. I have called the house 14 times in the past month, I told her. I know. And I also know that she had your father sign a financial power of attorney last Tuesday. She is on his accounts now. I sat very still with the phone in my hand. Not because my own assets were in any danger, they were not. Everything my father had transferred to me over the years was legally, separately, untouchably mine. But I recognized what I was watching. Sandra was not simply managing his care. She was managing access, controlling who saw him, what they heard, who could reach him, and who could not. She was doing what she had always done, centering herself and moving everyone else to the edges. Except now, the stakes were his life. 3 weeks later, my father had his second stroke. Sandra called the whole family. She organized hospital schedules, meal deliveries, rides from the church group. She was thorough, as always. She did not call me. I found out from a hospital nurse who noticed my last name in the system and called the emergency. Contact on file my cell phone number, which my father had listed years ago, long before Sandra had the chance to update it. His name was Martin, and he died on a Wednesday. Of course it was a Wednesday. The hospital called me at 4:21 in the afternoon. A nurse named Carol, steady and practiced, told me that Martin Irving had not survived a third cardiac event. She asked if I needed a moment. I said no. I said thank you. I said I would be there that evening. I drove 3 hours in the dark. No radio. I thought about the last time I had actually seen him, 6 weeks earlier. Through the kitchen window, as Sandra walked me back to my car. He had been sitting at the table watching me go, and he had raised one hand, not waving, just holding his palm up, still and steady, until I pulled out of the driveway. When I arrived at the house, there were neighbors' cars in the driveway. The porch light was on. Through the front window I could see Sandra in the kitchen arranging white flowers in a glass vase. She was wearing a black blouse, hair pinned up. She looked like a woman who had been expecting this for a long time and had already decided exactly how it was going to go. I went in through the side door the same way I had entered that house for 20 years. Upstairs, in what had once been my bedroom and was now her yoga studio, I set my bag on the mat and sat down on the floor. Sandra appeared in the doorway within 5 minutes. She stood with both hands on the doorframe and said, "You are not sleeping here. This house is mine now. Martin would have wanted it this way." I looked at the mat, at the incense, at the speaker mounted on the wall. None of this had been mine for a very long time. "Okay," I said. I picked up my bag. I walked downstairs. I passed Becca on the staircase. She was standing 3 steps up, holding her phone against her chest, saying nothing. She looked at me the way you look at someone leaving a building you know they are not coming back to. I drove to a motel for miles down the highway. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I went inside. The key to my building was in my coat pocket. I could feel the edge of it through the lining. I could have told her right there in that hallway. I could have laid it all out. Every number, every building, every document. But some truths land harder when they arrive on schedule. The motel room was $13.9 a night. The mattress sagged in the middle. The shower curtain had a mildew stain shaped roughly like the state of Ohio. The neon vacancy sign outside, the window cast a pink glow through the curtain that shifted each time a truck passed on the highway. I stayed 5 nights. Every morning before 6, I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I did not think about money. I thought about my father, about the Saturday morning drives, about the calculator, about the way he held his palm up through the kitchen window, not waving, just staying still. Grief is not impressed by net worth. It shows up at 3 in the morning, in a room that smells like bleach, sits on the edge of your bed, and waits. On the 3rd morning, I called my attorney, Elliot Hale, 46 years old, estate and asset protection law, spoke in complete paragraphs, always wore a slightly crooked tie. I had retained him 2 years earlier when I first realized what Sandra was positioning herself to do around my father's finances. "I need you to confirm everything is current," I said. He pulled the files and read them back to me. The 6-story commercial building downtown, 100% in my name. Transferred in stages over 18 years. Each transfer fully documented, tax filed, and notarized. The index fund, now valued at $4.2 million. A secondary real estate portfolio, 8 properties across 3 states. Combined value of $5.8 million. Cash reserves and brokerage accounts beyond that. Total assets held under the name Nadia Irving as of my father's date of death, approximately $28 million. None of it is part of his estate, Elliot said. None of it is subject to probate. None of it is Sandra's to claim. "I know," I said. "I just needed to hear you say it. Are you expecting a challenge?" "She will try, she will not win. I know that too." I hung up and sat on the edge of the motel bed while a semi-truck downshifted on the highway outside and the pink neon sign flickered once and held. My father had not left me money. He had left me roots. I had grown everything else myself. That night I opened my laptop and reviewed the portfolio the way I did every quarter. Not because I needed to check the numbers. Because it was the only ritual I had left that still felt like a conversation with him. The commercial building was the anchor. 6 floors, 32 tenants, full occupancy for the 3rd consecutive year. My father had bought his original shares when the closest business on that block was a taco stand, operating out of a converted school bus. He used to drive past it on Saturday mornings and say, "Someday that block is going to be worth something." He was right. The building alone was valued at approximately $18 million. The index fund he had seeded with $5,000 when I was 16 had grown to $4.2 million through compound returns, reinvested dividends, and my own contributions added every month without exception. Exactly the way he taught me. The secondary portfolio, $5.8 million across 8 commercial properties. Nothing speculative. Nothing flashy. Patient, boring, long-term accumulation. The kind of wealth that does not show up in a person's shoes or the car they drive. Sandra was fighting over a house worth $380,000. She had changed the locks and arranged flowers and rehearsed her sentences while the person she had just kicked Out held a portfolio worth more than 50 times the value of everything she was so desperate to protect. I closed the laptop. The room went dark, except for the fading blue glow on the ceiling. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel righteous. I felt tired, and I missed my father. And I wanted to call him and go through the numbers the way we had every quarter for 18 years. But some calls cannot be made anymore. 3 days before the will reading, Aunt Vera called me with news. She delivered without a greeting. Sandra withdrew $80,000 from the joint savings account yesterday. I sat up in the motel bed. How? She used the power of attorney Martin signed last spring. Walked into the branch with the document and a death certificate and asked for a cashier's check. That power of attorney expired the moment he died. That is state law. I know that. You know that. The teller apparently did not. I called Elliot within the hour. He confirmed it. The transaction had posted $80,000 removed from the account using a legal instrument that had ceased to be valid the moment my father's heart stopped. The withdrawal is fully contestable, Elliot said. But more than the legal issue, it tells us something important about her state of mind. She is panicking. She is grabbing what she can reach, because she suspects there is something she cannot. I asked him to pull the full transaction records. He did $80,000 out. The funeral had cost approximately $8,000. That left $72,000 with no documented explanation. Print everything, I told him. Bring it to Thursday's reading. Already done, he said. I hung up and sat at the small laminate desk in the motel room, staring at the wall. Sandra had taken the money because she was scared. I understood fear. Fear makes people do things they cannot justify in the daylight. But fear does not excuse $72,000 removed from a dead man's account using an expired legal document. That is not fear. That is something else wearing fear's clothing. Sandra called me for days before the reading. Her voice was smooth, controlled. The company voice, the one she used when guests were over and she needed help with something without making it seem like she was asking. Nadia, she said, I need to ask you something. Go ahead, your father. Did he ever mention a building? Something downtown? Becca said he used to bring it up at dinners sometimes. A building. Commercial property of some kind. I have been going through all his papers and I cannot find any record of it. I think everything will be addressed properly at the reading on Thursday. Silence. Then, Nadia, I was his wife for 22 years. I have a right to know what he owned. The attorney will explain everything at the appropriate time. I do not want to wait until Thursday. I want to know now. I understand that. Are you going to tell me or not? I think Thursday is the right time. She hung up. Then she called back. I did not answer. She called 2 more times in the next 7 minutes. I set the phone face down on the motel nightstand and listened to it buzz against the wood until it stopped. If you have ever been on the receiving end of a call from someone who only dials your number when they need something from you, you recognize that voice immediately. It arrives warmer than any voice they have ever used with you before. It skips directly over every wrong thing they have done and lands on the part where they need a favor. Sandra did not call to check on me. She called because the number she was finding did not add up, and I was the variable she had never bothered to account for. I turned the phone off and lay in the dark. Thursday would come soon enough. The law office of Warren Beckett was on the 2nd floor of a brick building on Main Street above a dentist's office, across from a bakery that filled the entire street with the smell of cinnamon rolls every morning. Narrow staircase. Wooden banister. A conference room with a long oval table in dark wood, 8 green leather chairs, and a window overlooking the parking lot. On the wall behind Warren's chair hung a framed law degree and a clock with Roman numerals that ticked louder than it had any reason to. Sandra arrived first. Black blazer, pressed slacks, pearl earrings. Becca followed in a gray cardigan with a small handbag. They took seats at the head of the table as though the arrangement had already been decided the night before. Aunt Vera came next, in a navy dress she had probably owned for 20 years, and flat shoes that made no sound on the carpet. She sat halfway down the table and folded her hands. 2 of my father's cousins, Frank and Roland, both in their 60s, both wearing ties that were slightly too short. took seats near the window, and nodded at everyone without speaking. I was the last to walk in. Elliot was beside me, leather briefcase with brass clasps, his tie slightly crooked as always. Sandra's eyes went directly to Elliot. Who is this? My attorney. Why do you need an attorney for a will reading? Because I am a beneficiary. She gave me a smile that ended well before it reached her eyes. Nadia, this will is straightforward. There is no reason to turn this into something it isn't. Warren cleared his throat. He was a tall man with white hair and reading glasses balanced at the very tip of his nose. He opened a folder and explained that before reading the will itself, he needed to address the structure of the estate. He said the word structure the way an architect says foundation, with the clear implication that everything else depended on understanding this part first. Sandra sat at the head of the table as if the outcome had already been announced. Warren read the will slowly. He was the kind of attorney who believed legal documents should be heard, not skimmed, and he gave each sentence its full weight. To Sandra, the family residence, free and clear of any mortgage or income, plus the remaining balance of the joint savings account. Sandra placed one hand flat on the table and nodded. To Becca, $20,000 from an education fund established in 2019. Becca blinked. $20,000. She looked at her mother. Sandra's jaw tightened, but she held her composure. That is the entirety of the probate estate, Warren said. The room waited. He adjusted his glasses and continued. However, I am obligated to inform all parties that the probate estate represents only a portion of the assets Martin Irving accumulated during his lifetime. Over the course of approximately 18 years, Martin Irving executed a series of legal asset transfers. Each was completed during his lifetime, with full documentation, notarized instruments, and accompanying tax filings. The assets in question are not part of the probate estate, and are therefore not subject to distribution under this will. Sandra's voice came out flat. Transfers, to whom? Warren removed his glasses. He looked at me. The clock on the wall ticked 3 times. To his daughter, Nadia Irving. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, packed tight with everything in that room that could not find words. Sandra stood up. Her chair scraped hard across the floor. The sound cut through the room like a match striking. What transfers? I am his wife. I have been his wife for 22 years. What exactly are you telling me? Warren gestured toward Elliot. Elliot stood. He opened the brass clasps on his briefcase to clean precise clicks that echoed in the quiet, and removed 3 folders. Each one tabbed, labeled, organized. He placed the first on the table. This is the deed of ownership for a 6-story commercial building located downtown. Originally purchased by Martin Irving in 1999, between 2008 and 2020, ownership was transferred in stages to Nadia Irving through legally executed gift transfers. Each was filed with the county recorder, accompanied by gift tax returns, and notarized with independent legal counsel. He opened the second folder. This is a summary statement for an investment portfolio held in the name of Nadia Irving since 2008. Index funds, dividend reinvestment accounts, and equity in 8 additional commercial properties across 3 states. He opened the third folder and placed his hand on top of it. This is a consolidated asset valuation prepared by a certified public accountant, dated as of the week of Martin Irving's death. He looked at the room. The total value of assets held under the name Nadia Irving, as of that date, is approximately $28 million. Nobody moved. Becca's mouth opened. She pressed both hands flat on the table as if the number had tilted the room sideways. Frank leaned back in his chair. Roland set his glasses on the table. Aunt Vera, who had known, gave one small nod and folded her hands tighter. Sandra did not sit down. She stood at the head of the table, fingers gripping the edge, knuckles going white against the dark wood. No, she said. No, that is Martin's money. She took it from him. Elliot did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Every transaction was executed by Martin Irving, voluntarily, with independent legal counsel, over a period of 18 years. These are not estate assets. They are the personal property of Nadia Irving. Sandra turned to me. Her face had lost every trace of the composure she had worn like armor since the night she changed the locks. "You knew," she said. "You sat at my table every Wednesday for years and ate dinner, and you knew all of this." I looked at her steadily. "You locked me out of the house for hours after my father died. You changed the locks before his body was cold. Now you want to have a conversation about what I knew." The clock ticked. Nobody spoke. Elliot was not finished. He reached into the briefcase one final time and set a single sheet of paper in the center of the table. Face up, edges aligned. On the 9th day following Martin Irving's death, a withdrawal of $80,000 was made from the joint savings account at First Regional Bank. The withdrawal was executed using a financial power of attorney signed by Martin Irving last spring. Warren looked up. "Under state law," Elliot continued, "a power of attorney terminates automatically at the death of the principal." Martin Irving died on October 11th. The withdrawal was made on October 20th. The document used to authorize that transaction had no legal standing at the time it was presented. Sandra's voice came out thin. "I needed that money for funeral arrangements." Elliot slid the paper toward her. Funeral expenses, as documented by the service provider, totaled $8,214. The withdrawal was $80,000. That leaves $71,786 unaccounted for. The room went quiet in the particular way that happens when everyone is doing the same math at the same time. Frank looked at the ceiling. Roland looked at his shoes. Aunt Vera looked at Sandra with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not pity, but something closer to the resignation of someone who had hoped, until this exact moment, that they were wrong about a person. Warren spoke carefully. "Sandra, I would strongly advise you to consult independent counsel before making any statements regarding that transaction." Becca said, "Mom, just the one word. The way you say a word when it is not a question but a request. Please stop. Please sit down. Please tell me this is not what it looks like." Sandra did not sit down. She did not speak. She stood at the head of the table, both hands gripping the edge. And for the first time in 22 years, she had nothing left to say. Somewhere below, through the floor of the dentist's office, a drill started up. A small, persistent sound that no one could switch off. Sandra sat down. It was not graceful. She dropped into the chair like the strings had been cut. Her hands fell into her lap. She stared at the table. 22 years, she said. Her voice was smaller now. All the authority had gone out of it. "I cooked for him. I cleaned for him. I drove him to every single appointment. I sat in the hospital for 11 hours the night of his first stroke. I held his hand. Nobody answered. The clock ticked. I did not have a career when I met Martin. I had no savings. My first husband walked out and left me with a leased car, a maxed credit card, and a daughter who was 18 months old. Martin knew all of that. He knew exactly where I came from. He told me I would never go through anything like that again." She looked at Warren. "Does none of that count for anything?" Warren said carefully. "The house is yours, free and clear. The savings account, minus the contested withdrawal, belonged to you as part of the estate. Martin did not leave you with nothing, Sandra. He left me a house," she said. "And he gave her $28 million. He gave her those assets during his lifetime," Warren said. "They were his to give." Aunt Vera spoke for the first time. She had been sitting quietly through the entire reading, watching everything, hands folded, waiting for the right moment the way she always waited for things. "Martin loved you, Sandra," she said. "He married you because he genuinely loved you. But he also loved Nadia, and he knew, we both knew, that you would never share willingly. So he made sure Nadia was taken care of long before any of this ever came to a reading." Sandra stared at her. "You knew about this? Martin told me years ago. He said, Sandra will never give Nadia anything on her own, Vera, so it has to already be done. He was not being cruel to you. He was being honest with himself." Becca moved her chair closer to her mother and put her hand on Sandra's arm. Sandra did not acknowledge it. "I did not know," Sandra said quietly. "I did not know any of this." And there it was. The most honest sentence Sandra had spoken in 22 years. She did not know because she had never considered the possibility. She had spent 2 decades so certain that Nadia was the one who did not matter. The quiet girl who came every Wednesday, washed the dishes, and drove home, that she had never once looked past what she wanted to believe. She had never asked a single question that might have led her somewhere uncomfortable. And by the time the truth arrived, it arrived in 3 folders on a conference table. And it was far too late to do anything except sit with it. I stood up. Every person in that room looked at me. I did not come here to take anything from anyone, I said. Everything under my name has been mine for years. I came here so that every person in this room would know the full truth. Not part of it, all of it. I looked at Sandra. She did not look away. From today forward, I will not be calling. I will not be visiting. I will not be explaining myself. If you or Becca need to reach me for any reason, you may do so through Elliot. I picked up my bag from the floor. I turned to Aunt Vera. Thank you, Vera. She gave me one small, steady nod. We had always understood each other in the same shorthand my father used to nod. A hand held still, a squeeze that said everything without saying anything. I walked to the door. My footsteps were even on the hardwood, unhurried. At the threshold, I stopped. I turned, not all the way, just enough to see Sandra's profile at the head of the table. You said the house is yours, I said. Then keep it. I have never needed it. I closed the door behind me. Not a slam. Not a soft pull. A firm, quiet, close. The way my father had taught me to end things. Deliberate, final, without looking back. In the hallway, the carpet was worn thin in front of the elevator. Elliot fell into step beside me without a word. He knew that some moments do not require commentary. The elevator was out of service. We took the stairs. On the landing, Frank and Roland caught up with us. Frank extended his hand. Your father would have been proud of you today, he said. I shook it. He would have told me to check the portfolio before driving home, I said. Frank almost laughed. Roland nodded. They walked to their car, and I walked to mine. The cinnamon roll smell from the bakery across the street followed me down the sidewalk. Warm and completely ordinary and entirely indifferent to everything that had just happened upstairs. That was fine. Ordinary was fine. I sat in the car for a long time. The parking lot was nearly empty. Elliot had gone. Frank and Roland had gone. Inside that building, Sandra and Becca were still in the conference room, still absorbing, still working out what the shape of their lives was going to look like going forward. I put my hands on the steering wheel and stared through the windshield at a drain pipe on the brick wall across the lot. There was a rust stain running down the side of it, shaped roughly like a question mark. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. And then I cried. Not for the money. Not for Sandra. Not for 22 years of 3-place settings and missing Christmas cards and a yoga mat where my bed used to be. I cried for my father. Because he had known. He had seen this day coming the way he used to spot an undervalued property from the road, and he had spent 18 years quietly preparing for it. Not with arguments or ultimatums or speeches, but with paperwork. With documents. With transfers executed one steady step at a time, each one a small act of love, disguised as routine administration. He could not change who Sandra was. He had loved her in his way and chosen to stay, and I had made my peace with that, even when I could not entirely forgive it. But he had made absolutely certain that when the day arrived, and he had always known the day would arrive, I would be standing on ground that no one could take from me. I wiped my face. I started the car. On the way out of town, I drove past the building. My building. 6 floors of glass and brick with a small brass plaque near the entrance that read Irving Commercial. I had not changed the name. I did not plan to. I pulled over with the engine idling and looked up at the lights still on in the 4th floor windows. Some tenant working late, completely unaware that the woman parked on the street below owned the ceiling above their head. Now I want to pause here for just a moment. If you have ever been the one who held everything together alone, the one who showed up even when there was no chair waiting for you, the one who kept quiet while someone else took up all the space, the one who built something in silence while people around you assumed you had nothing, this story is for you. Her side of the story exists because there are so many of us. Women who stayed composed, who played the long game, who did not get credit until the receipts came out. If any part of this hit close to home, leave a comment below. Tell me, did you ever have to walk away from someone who only valued you on their own terms? I read every single one, and I want to hear from you. And if you are not subscribed yet, please do. It means more than I can say. This channel exists because of you. 3 weeks after the reading, Sandra hired an estate attorney named Mr. Tate, who specialized in contesting transfers. He reviewed every document Elliot had presented, the deeds, the tax records, the notarized instruments, the full 18-year paper trail, and called Sandra within a week. There is no basis for a challenge, he told her. These transfers were executed voluntarily by a competent adult with independent legal representation over 18 years. There is no evidence of undue influence, coercion, or diminished capacity. Martin Irving knew exactly what he was doing. Sandra pushed back. She said she had never been made aware. Mr. Tate explained that the law does not require a spouse to be notified of gifts made from separately owned assets. The building had been purchased before the marriage. The investment fund had been seeded with premarital funds. Every transfer was traceable, documented, and clean. Your husband was generous to you, he told her. He left you the family home, free of debt. He left you the savings. He did not leave you with nothing. He left me with nothing compared to what he gave her, Sandra said. Mr. Tate did not respond to that. The $80,000 matter was resolved separately. Elliot sent a formal letter requesting the return of the $72,000 that exceeded the documented funeral costs. Mr. Tate advised Sandra to comply. She did. The check arrived at Elliot's office within 10 days, drawn from the personal account she had opened the morning after the withdrawal. Becca sent me a text 3 days later. It was the first time she had ever contacted me directly. It said, I did not know what she was going to do that night. I am sorry. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down. I was not angry at Becca, but I also remembered her standing on that staircase, watching me walk out with a duffel bag, not saying a single word. Not being ready to reply is not the same as not caring. I had learned that about myself too. The family shifted in the months that followed. Frank and Roland reached out. Neighbors from the old street called. The story Sandra had quietly maintained for 2 decades. Nadia is distant. Nadia doesn't visit. Nadia doesn't care. Collapsed the moment Elliot set 3 folders on a conference table. The very isolation she had so carefully built around me had found its way back to her. 6 months later, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a building overlooking a public park. Hardwood floors that creaked near the bathroom. A kitchen with enough counter space to actually cook something properly. 2 east-facing windows that caught the morning light and sent it in long warm stripes across the floor right where I had placed my desk. That spring, I opened my own consulting firm. I named it Irving Compliance Group, not out of sentiment. My father would have found sentimentality wasteful. It was a statement of origin. Everything I knew about reading numbers with patience, about understanding what a ledger actually says when you know how to listen. It started with him. Aunt Vera came for dinner once a month. She brought bread from the bakery near her house, and a bottle of wine she always claimed was on sale, though it never actually was. We ate at the small table by the window, and talked about Martin not with grief, but with the particular warmth that comes from knowing someone exactly as they were, without any revision. He used to say you were the only person in the family who truly understood interest rates. She told me one evening, slicing sourdough. He used to say something like that about everyone he liked, I said. She smiled. No, just you. I kept one thing from that house. Not the house itself. Not the furniture. Not the photographs Sandra had arranged and rearranged over 22 years. I kept the calculator. It sat on my desk every single day beside my laptop. A 30-year-old pocket calculator with a cracked plastic case, yellowed keys, and a display that flickered slightly when you pressed the equal sign too hard. The brand name on the bottom had worn off entirely. The battery compartment was held shut with a piece of tape my father had put there when I was 17 and the latch broke on a Saturday drive. One morning I picked it up. The plastic was warm from the sunlight coming through the east window. I turned it on. The screen lit up a faint gray-green glow, the numbers slightly uneven, the decimal point brighter than the digits. Still working. Of course, it was still working. My father did not buy things that stopped working. I typed in the number. To 8. I looked at it for a long time. The screen held the number without judgment, without commentary, without applause. It was just math. The same way it had always been just math on those Saturday morning drives. In the office, with the desk lamp humming, on the quarterly Sunday calls. In the motel room at 3 in the morning with the neon sign blinking pink through the curtain. He had said it once. In that truck. Outside a colonial with a cracked driveway. Knowing how to count means you will never be caught off guard. He was right. I was never caught off guard. Not by Sandra. Not by the locked door. Not by the 3 chairs at the funeral. Not by any of it. But I would have traded every single dollar on that screen to hear him say, "Good job," one more time. I turned the calculator off. The screen went dark. I set it back on the desk where it lived beside the laptop. In the morning light. And I picked up my coffee and opened my email and started the day. Outside, the park was filling up with joggers and dog walkers and a woman pushing a stroller through the fallen leaves. The light was still coming through the east windows. The floor creaked near the bathroom. The bread Vera had brought on Sunday was still on the counter, wrapped in a cloth napkin, enough left for toast. This was my life. I had built it, and it was enough. My name is Nadia Irving. And that is my story. My father did not leave me a fortune. He left me the one thing no one can take from you once you truly have it. The ability to never need anyone's permission to exist. If this story meant something to you today, please like this video, subscribe to her side of the story, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. For every woman who held it together alone, there will be more stories just like this. I will see you in the next one.